The woman nobody wanted at the helm. Lieutenant Jessica "Jess" Morgan had dreamed of commanding ships since she was 8 years old, watching Navy vessels glide through the waters near her coastal hometown. By 2005, at age 27, she had graduated from the Naval Academy, completed all her qualifications, and earned her certification as a surface warfare officer. She was fully qualified to serve as officer of the deck, the person responsible for safely navigating a ship. But when she reported to the USS Valiant, a guided missile destroyer, she quickly discovered that qualifications on paper didn't mean acceptance on the bridge. Captain Richard Brennan was old-school Navy, a man who had spent 30 years at sea and had very fixed ideas about who belonged where on his ship. And in his mind, women didn't belong at the helm. "You can observe, Lieutenant," he told her on her first day. "You can learn. You can assist with navigation plotting and communications. But you will not touch the ship's controls on my bridge. Is that clear?" Jess stood at attention, her jaw clenched. "Sir, I'm fully qualified to stand watch as OOD. I've completed all the requirements." "I didn't ask about your qualifications, Lieutenant. I gave you an order. You will not touch those controls. When you have your own command someday, if you have your own command, you can run things however you want. But this is my ship, and on my bridge, experienced hands steer this vessel. Dismissed." The other officers on the bridge looked away, embarrassed but unwilling to challenge the captain. Jess saluted and took her position at the navigation table, fuming silently. She had faced discrimination before, but never so blatant, so direct. But she was Navy, and she would follow orders, even orders she believed were unjust. Proving herself in small ways. Over the following months, Jess did everything she could to prove her competence. She arrived early for every watch. She studied the ship's capabilities obsessively. She could recite every system, every protocol, every emergency procedure from memory. When other officers struggled with complex navigation problems, she solved them quickly and accurately. When communications became tangled during exercises, she untangled them with calm efficiency. The crew began to respect her. The other junior officers sought her advice. Even the senior chiefs, usually the toughest group to win over, started nodding approvingly at her work. Everyone could see she was capable, competent, and cool under pressure. Except Captain Brennan. He acknowledged her skills in navigation and communication. He even noted in her fitness report that she was an excellent staff officer. But he never wavered on his fundamental position. She would not take the helm of his ship. The experienced helmsman, Chief Petty Officer Mike Reynolds, was his man at the controls. Reynolds had been steering Navy ships for 15 years, and Brennan trusted him completely. "Nothing personal, Lieutenant," Reynolds told her one day during a quiet watch. "The captain's just set in his ways. He'll come around eventually. You're good at what you do. Everyone can see that." Jess appreciated the kindness, but she was growing frustrated. She hadn't joined the Navy to plot courses on paper. She wanted to feel the ship respond to her commands, to be responsible for bringing the vessel and its crew safely through whatever challenges arose. But that opportunity seemed impossibly distant. The storm of the century. In November 2005, the USS Valiant was operating in the North Pacific as part of a larger naval exercise. Weather forecasts had predicted rough seas, but nothing unusual for that time of year. Navy ships were built to handle heavy weather, and the crew was experienced. But weather in the North Pacific is notoriously unpredictable. What started as a standard storm system rapidly intensified into something far more dangerous. Within hours, the Valiant was dealing with 30-foot waves, winds gusting over 60 knots, and visibility reduced to near zero. Captain Brennan was on the bridge, as he always was during challenging conditions. Chief Reynolds was at the helm, his hands steady on the controls, his eyes fixed on the instruments, and the churning sea visible through the forward windows. Jess was at the navigation station, tracking the ship's position and monitoring weather updates that were growing increasingly alarming. "Captain, latest weather update shows the storm intensifying. Winds now forecast at 70 knots, with wave heights potentially exceeding 40 feet. Brennan nodded grimly. "Steady as she goes, Chief. Keep us bow into the waves. We'll ride this out like we always do." The ship climbed each massive wave, hung suspended at the crest, then plunged down the far side, the entire vessel shuddering with the impact. It was brutal, exhausting work. Every movement had to be calculated. Every course correction had to be timed perfectly. If the ship turned broadside to those waves, they could roll it over. Then the radio crackled with an emergency call. One of the escort vessels, smaller and more vulnerable, was taking on water. They needed immediate assistance. Brennan made the difficult decision to alter course toward the distressed vessel, knowing it would expose the Valiant to more dangerous wave angles. When everything changed, the ship was in the middle of a complex turn, temporarily more vulnerable to the massive seas when it happened. A wave larger than anything they had yet encountered, what mariners call a rogue wave, formed by the convergence of multiple wave patterns, rose up out of the storm like a mountain of water. "Brace for impact!" Brennan shouted. The wave hit the ship's forward section with the force of a collapsing building. Green water crashed over the bow, sweeping across the deck. The impact was so violent that it shattered one of the bridge windows. Seawater and glass exploded into the bridge. The ship rolled heavily to port, and Chief Reynolds, standing near the shattered window, was caught by the surge of water and debris. In an instant, he was swept across the bridge, slammed into a bulkhead, and knocked unconscious. He collapsed on the deck, bleeding from a head wound, water still pouring through the broken window. "Man down!" someone shouted. Two sailors rushed to Reynolds, dragging him away from the broken window and beginning first aid. The ship, meanwhile, was now uncontrolled. With no one at the helm, it was starting to turn beam on to the waves, the most dangerous position possible. The next large wave would hit them broadside. It could capsize them. Captain Brennan lunged for the helm, but another violent roll threw him off balance. He grabbed a handhold to keep from falling, but he was too far away to reach the controls in time. "Lieutenant Morgan!" he shouted over the howling wind and alarms. "Take the helm now!" Jess didn't hesitate. In 3 quick strides, she was at the controls. Her hands found the wheel. Her eyes scanned the instruments, processing information in a fraction of a second. The ship was turning the wrong way. The next wave was seconds away. She had to act. She spun the wheel hard, applying emergency rudder. The ship was sluggish, heavy with water on deck, fighting her. But she'd studied this ship's handling characteristics for months. She knew exactly how much rudder authority she had, exactly how the vessel would respond. "Come on," she muttered. "Turn for me. Turn!" The bow began to swing, slowly at first, then faster. The next wave was rising before them, another monster. But Jess had the bow coming around, pointing into it. "Increase speed to 15 knots, she ordered. "I need more steerage." The engine room responded. The ship surged forward, giving her more control. The wave hit them bow first, exactly as it should. The ship climbed the face of the wave, shuddering but holding course. They crested the top and plunged down the far side. "Maintain this heading," Brennan ordered, his voice tight. "Keep us bow into the waves, Lieutenant." For the next 40 minutes, Jess held the helm. It was the most intense experience of her life. Every muscle in her body was engaged, fighting the wheel, feeling the ship's movements, reading the waves, making constant, tiny corrections. The physical effort was exhausting. The mental focus required was total. One mistake could kill everyone on board. But she didn't make mistakes. She read the sea like she'd been born to it. When waves came from unexpected angles, she adjusted. When the ship threatened to broach, she corrected. When equipment malfunctioned, she compensated using manual controls. Gradually, the storm began to ease. The waves decreased in size, the winds dropped, the emergency was passing. Finally, Brennan spoke. "I have the con. Lieutenant Morgan, you are relieved." Jess stepped back from the helm, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Her shirt was soaked with seawater and sweat. Her arms felt like lead. But the ship was safe. The crew was safe. A changed captain, a changed ship. Chief Reynolds recovered from his injuries, but he would need weeks of medical leave. Captain Brennan had to assign someone to fill his position at the helm. He called Jess to his cabin. "Lieutenant Morgan," he began, then paused. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncomfortable. "I was wrong. About you. About women at the helm. I based my judgment on prejudice and outdated thinking, not on your actual capabilities." He stood and extended his hand. "You saved this ship today. You saved all of us. And you did it with skill that many officers with twice your experience couldn't match. If you're willing, I'd like you to serve as officer of the deck on my bridge, not as a fill-in, as a qualified, trusted member of my team." Jess shook his hand, too overwhelmed to speak for a moment. Then she found her voice. "It would be an honor, sir." In the months that followed, Jess regularly stood watch as OOD, guiding the Valiant through calm seas and rough weather. Word of what had happened spread through the fleet. The story of the lieutenant who proved herself when it mattered most became something of a legend, not because it was unique, but because it shouldn't have had to happen at all. The lesson in the wave. Jess Morgan's story asks us to consider how many capable people are prevented from showing what they can do because of someone else's prejudice. How many times does someone have to prove themselves before they're given the chance they already earned? Jess was fully qualified to serve as officer of the deck before she ever stepped onto the Valiant. She had completed every requirement, passed every test, met every standard. But she wasn't allowed to do the job she was trained for until an emergency left no other choice. And here's the tragic part. She was lucky. The emergency happened while she was there, qualified and ready. How many others never get that chance? How many capable people are held back by barriers that have nothing to do with their actual abilities? Captain Brennan, to his credit, admitted his mistake and changed. But he shouldn't need a life-threatening emergency to recognize what everyone else on that ship already knew. Jess Morgan was a skilled, competent officer who deserved the opportunities her qualifications had earned. The real hero of this story isn't just Jess, though her skill and courage were undeniable. The real victory is that afterward, the Navy she served in became slightly better, slightly more willing to judge people by their capabilities rather than their gender. Every barrier broken makes it easier for the next person. Every prejudice overcome creates space for the next generation. Today, women command Navy destroyers, cruisers, and aircraft carriers. They serve in every role, including combat positions. When rough seas threaten, when helmsmen are injured, when emergencies arise, the question isn't, is there a qualified officer available, with unspoken assumptions about what qualified looks like? The question is simply, who's ready to take the helm? And increasingly, the answer is, whoever earned the right to be there, regardless of gender. If Lieutenant Morgan's story inspired you, help us share it. Like to honor every qualified professional who had to fight for the opportunity they already earned. Subscribe for more true stories of courage at sea and barrier-breaking heroes. Share with someone who's been told they can't do something they're fully qualified to do. Comment. Have you ever had to prove yourself over and over despite being qualified? Or have you witnessed someone else facing that challenge? Share your story. Remember, capability isn't about gender, race, or background. It's about skill, training, courage, and the opportunity to show what you can do. Let's make sure capable people get that opportunity before emergencies force the issue.